A very warm welcome to everyone to today's symposium on Hindu-Buddhist philosophical dialogues. Let me begin with a prayer. Vakratunda Mahakaya Koti Surya Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada Sarvamangala Mangalye Shive Sarvartha Sadike Sharanye Trayambake Gauri Narayani Namostute Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavatyapta Dehaya Sri Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. Again, Shubhodaya to everyone. A very warm welcome to today's symposium. This is Nitin Sridhar, Director and Chief Curator of Indica Moksha, and I, along with Dr. Nagaraj Paturi ji, are the co-curators of this today's symposium. Throughout history, India has been a home to diverse religious, philosophical, and spiritual traditions. And the most beautiful aspect of this is that the fact that each of these traditions have had their own unique knowledge, unique rituals, unique traditions. Despite this diversity, they have also been united through a shared history and a civilizational vision anchored in dharma. And at the heart of this, what I call as dynamic unity and a religious spiritual pluralism, is the Indian philosophical tradition of dialogue called Vada. The term Vada, simply put, means to speak. It has a variety of meanings, including dialogue, discourse, a thesis, a doctrine, an argument, a discussion, a controversy, a dispute, a debate, among other things. The Vada, by definition, is such that it cannot exist in isolation. It cannot exist in singularity. There cannot be Vada without at least two diverse points of view. So Vada, by definition, is that which thrives in diversity and facilitates accommodation and thriving of diverse viewpoints. And importantly, Vada not only includes an exchange of ideas, but also a search for truth through logical debate and critique of opponents' views. And this very beautiful tradition, Indian tradition of Vada, can be easily traced back to Vedic literature, with among the earliest usage of the term Brahmodya that we find in Upanishads, denoting this philosophical discussion. And one of the most graphic examples of this kind we find in the conversation between Yajnavalkya and Gargi in the Upanishads. In the last 2000 years, there have been many Vadas, many Vakyarthas, many dialogues and debates between different darshanas, which have resulted in the formation of the philosophical foundation of Indian civilization. And this foundation has been formed through intellectual refinement that Vada brings. And one of the finest example of such intellectual refinement through dialogue, through debate, is the Hindu-Buddhist philosophical debate and dialogue that has happened since in the first millennia for many centuries, wherein the Hindu darshanas, Hindu schools of philosophy such as Nyaya, Mimamsa, and different schools of Vedanta, including Advaita Vedanta, have actively engaged with different schools of Buddhist philosophy, such as Sarvastivada, Shautranikas, Vaibhashikas, Madhyamakas, and Vijnanavadi. So for today's symposium, we are very happy and very fortunate that we have been able to invite very distinguished speakers who will be shedding light on how great teachers, great acharyas from Nyaya, Mimamsa, Advaita, Vishishta Advaita, Shaiva, and Vallabha Sampradayas have actively engaged and critiqued prominent philosophical doctrines propounded by different Buddhist schools. We are hopeful that this symposium will inspire various scholars, traditional Vidwans, and others to take interest in such Vada, to revive the spirit of the Vada tradition and engage in such philosophical dialogues in the present time more and more. Thank you again for everyone, the speakers, the audience, my team, everybody for joining us today. Now we will begin the symposium with the inaugural talk by my colleague, Dr. Nagaraj Paturi ji, who is the Senior Director and Dean IKS Studies of Indica. But before we proceed, let me introduce you to him. Dr. Nagaraj Paturi ji is trained in Samskrita and Advaita Vedanta by his hyper polyglot, polymath and spiritually accomplished Sakala Shastra Parangata father, late Sri Paturi Sitaramanjaneyulu Garu. Dr. Paturi ji is seriously committed to the transmission of Vedic sciences to present generation. In his PhD thesis, which he submitted in 1998, he had developed an Indic model of myth criticism of literature, and in his MPhil, he had foregrounded Vakyapadiya as the theoretical foundation of the Ashtadhyayi. In addition to over 50 publications and about 60 conference and seminar papers, Dr. Paturi has designed several courses pertaining to contemporary applications of Vedic sciences and has successfully taught them and facilitated others to teach them. Formerly Senior Professor of Cultural Studies, Flame School of Communication, and a visiting professor at University of Chicago, Dr. Paturiji is currently full-time with Indica as Senior Director and Dean IKS. He is a distinguished professor, curriculum designer, executive committee member, Board of Studies at MIT School of Vedic Sciences. He is also member Board of Studies at Kavikulaguru Kalidasa Samskrita University in Maharashtra. And he is also the editor-in-chief of International Journals of Studies in Public Leadership and is a member of Advisory Council of Veda Vijnana Shodha Samsthana, Bengaluru. He has provided consultancy to numerous cultural research, theatre and dance innovation projects. He has authored scores of creative writing works for classical dance, modern theatre and magazines, and has delivered many lectures, talks and programs on radio and television channels. We are truly glad and truly happy that you are able to do the inaugural talk, Nagaraj ji, and I'm personally looking forward for you to lay the foundation, lay the initial spark for this today's symposium. So please start your inaugural talk, and he will be his talk will be on the topic Vaidika-Bauddha Doctrinal Interface, a review of contemporary studies. I think this is a very good starting point for the symposium. We'll start in the contemporary studies and we will go back to the Vada that happened in the past. Over to you, Dr. Nagaraj ji.
Namaste. विदिताखिल शास्त्रसुधा जलधे महितोपनिषत् कथितार्थनिधे हृदये कलये विमलं चरणं भवशङ्करदेशिकमे शरणम्। Namaste to all the august audience and my co-panelists. This particular topic of debates between Vaidika and Buddha doctrines was in fact chosen by the founder of Indic Academy. As always, actually, most of the topics for our symposiums and conferences are all chosen by the incessantly creative founder of Indic Academy, Sri Harikiran Vadlamani garu. The discussion started while he was studying a book by a certain author, I think Alson, in which he talks about the influence of Madhyamika Bauddha thoughts on Gaudapada's Mandukyopanishad Karikas. And then I was mentioning in the conversation that within Gaudapada Karikas itself, there is a portion of a Karika, a quarter of a Karika, which says, Naitat Buddhena Bhashitam. Na etat Buddhena Bhashitam. Which very clearly shows that there is an awareness in the author Gaudapada Acharya that there was already a notion that certain Vedantic ideas were in consonance with or in agreement with or borrowed from or the same as some Buddhist ideas. So the author had to consciously clarify that, see here, at this point, this is where Vedantic thought differs from the Buddhist thought. We had that conversation and it went on, and Sri Harikiran Garu was very happy to know that not just in Vedanta, but in Nyaya, Mimamsa, and other Shastras also, there is a very considered and rigorous debate, critique of certain Buddhist doctrines. Then we thought that, okay, let us have a symposium on this and take the help of expert scholars in putting forth all the ideas. One confession that has to be made before we start the symposium is that the presentations in today's symposium are all going to be from the Vaidika side. From the Buddha side, what was the Buddha reception or Buddha interaction with the Vaidika doctrines? For that, actually, we were not able to locate proper scholars, and those who were located were not able to come to the symposium. So we have this limitation that Vaidika side reception, critique, and response to the Buddha side of doctrines only is going to be presented in this symposium. It does not mean that there is not the other side, the Buddha side reception, response, critique of the uh, Vaidika side ideas, but that needs a separate expertise. Those scholars who are experts in presenting the Buddha side response to the Vaidika ideas, they can do that. They can present those talks. If possible, if we get an opportunity to collect all those scholars for a symposium, we will be organizing that side of the discussion also. When we say interface, it means both sides. Actually, there is a reception and response from both the sides. In the title of the symposium, you found the word Hindu, and there is this Hindu-Buddhist dialogue and all those words. But in the title of my talk, specific talk, I chose not to use the word Hindu. I chose to use the word Vaidika only. Uh, because the word Hindu is a modern word, it's a contemporary word. And what is the semantic scope of this word Hindu is not settled yet. It is going on and on. And the narrowing down of the semantic scope of the word Hindu is growing so much that if that narrowing is accepted, ultimately there will be no Hindus left. Everyone who has been identified as Hindus by those who first used the word Hindu when they traveled from the west to the Indic subcontinent, um, gradually contemporary scholarship is trying to show, oh, this is not Hindu, this is not Hindu, this is not Hindu, and ultimately there will be no Hindu left. So my idea is that it's not good to fall into the trap of this is not Hindu, this is not Hindu, neti neti. And it is better to use the insider word for the insider categories. So this distinction between what in contemporary parlance they call Buddhist in English is Buddha in the traditional expression. And as a contrast to Buddha, the word was Vaidika. So I am using those two words only, Vaidika and Buddha only. The book Sarvadarshana Sangraha, which collects all the darshanas of the time, it has a classification, Astika and Nastika. And Buddha is put under Nastika darshanas in that particular compilation. And the basis for putting Buddha under Nastika darshanas there is acceptance or not non-acceptance of Veda as a pramana. And there are some other criterion also, like accepting the Paraloka, etc. But as all those who are engaged in comparative religion know there is a very widely recognized classification of religions all over the world, comparative religion studies. That is, dharmic religions and Abrahamic religions. When religions are classified into a group called dharmic religions, Buddhism, Jainism, and Hinduism are put under the same category called dharmic religions. For valid reasons, because dharma is the central category, key category, important category shared by all these three, Vaidika-Bauddha and Jaina. It is justified to call all these three as dharmic religions. Not just dharma, there are other shared key concepts like karma, punarjanma, and there is a similarity between certain concepts like nirvana and moksha. So, for all such reasons, it is highly justified in the world comparative religion studies in all the universities to put Vaidika, Bauddha, and Jaina under the same category called dharmic religions. Another justification for keeping these three under the same category is obviously the geographical, cultural sharing of these three religions also. The religions existed side by side for several centuries in the same geographical region, and they share a lot of cultural milieu. That is the reason the concepts travel from one of these to the other. Third reason is the languages also. The works in Buddhism are not just in Pali that people talk about. There is a very big corpus of Buddhist literature that exists in Sanskrit. And Pali, even if we talk about the Pali corpus of Buddhist literature, is a highly related language to Sanskrit. It is almost like a Prakrita of Sanskrit. Prakritas and Sanskrit have a dialectal relationship, which means that there is a very high possibility of conversion of words from one of these dialects like Sanskrit into the other dialect like Pali, or one of these dialects like Pali to the other dialect like Sanskrit. So there is they belong to the same language as such. There is only dialectal difference. There is no language difference between Prakrit and Sanskrit. So the original literature being in the same language also is a shared aspect of these religions, including Jainism. Today, Jainism is not our focus, so we are not talking about it, but it has the same kind of literature being in Sanskrit, Pali, Prakrit, uh, and all this. And the words, keywords that are used are not limited to dharma, karma, janma, punarjanma, nirvana, moksha kind of words. There is, if we take the common vocabulary, including taking into consideration the phonetic changes of vocabulary from Sanskrit to Prakrit, Prakrit to Sanskrit, then there is this keywords list goes much beyond these one or two obvious conspicuous words like dharma, karma, etc. Okay, so now uh, after looking at the uh, reason for justifiability for placing these traditions or cultures or cultural strands side by side, and looking at their interface, interaction for centuries, if not millennia, let us see the contemporary reception for uh, that kind of interaction and interface. One very interesting thing is that Buddha and Buddhism, this is an English word, Bauddha, Sampradaya, Bauddha Parampara, we should call it, received a fillip of research, fillip of studies only during colonial times, only during British times. Because during British times, there was a very great amount of work that was happening on manuscripts. A manuscript research was happening, and printing came into existence. And manuscripts were being brought into printing. Many Buddhist texts and manuscripts that were only heard by Vaidika Panditas, but the manuscript was not in their hand, were being brought out by this new activity of manuscript research and manuscript publication, textual criticism of these manuscripts, and bringing out those manuscripts as publications. So Vaidika Panditas were also happy that the books that they heard about from the Buddha side were now in their hand. They are able to actually, for example, Buddha Charitam, uh, Vajra Suchi, or all these books, when they were getting published, they were very happy to see that they are now able to see the text directly, what is actually said in the text. Uh, Unlike in the past, where they knew those books only through quotations in the Vaidika Granthas. That was a positive side. And there was a political reception of this new knowledge of Buddha and Buddhism. This political reception can be categorized into three kinds. One is that the scholars, new scholars from India were very happy to see that some aspect of their past which was not very clearly known to them till then, was coming out. And they started coming up with all kinds of theories about why a parampara, a tradition, which was very strong as per the new historical research that was coming up during the colonial times, gradually weakened in most of the parts of Indic subcontinent, and remained only in some parts of Indic subcontinent, and remained very strong in the other parts of the globe, like in Japan or the East Asia, Southeast Asian countries, or Sri Lanka, or other places. And these theorizations have, from that day till the day today, have remained completely ad hoc. None of these theories is a very sound theory. None of these actually is highly rigorous. All these ad hoc theories come up by putting forth one model after the other. One model says that it was a Kshatriya Brahmana conflict, and Bauddha parampara comes from Kshatriya side, and because Brahmanas and Kshatriyas had a highly traditional conflict, this conflict between Bauddha and Vaidika was a Kshatriya Brahmana conflict. And they all these fancy theories went around. But the most fancy theory, the most fanciful theory of them is that Bauddha is a materialistic theory as against the idealistic theory of Brahmanism. This materialistic and idealistic as two different categories are obviously the categories coming from a very recent development in the Western philosophy. Matter and idea as two different contrasting categories, mutually exclusive categories, became key philosophical notions through and after Hegel. And Hegel got labeled as an idealist. And in India, by that time, when Buddhism was getting branded as a materialist philosophy, it was not Hegelian thinkers here, it was Marxist thinkers. Obviously, because Marxism, as admitted by Marx himself, is a different version of Hegelianism. This material ideal distinction and one strand of philosophy getting labeled as idealist, the other category strand of philosophy getting labeled as materialist, all started at that time. And it became fashionable in India, in academics, to say Shankara was an idealist. This one is an idealist. This one is a materialist. Charvakas are materialist. Uh, this one, Bauddhas were materialist, and so on and so forth. Probably because this new interest in Marxism created a liking for materialism as a positive philosophy, acceptable, likable, lovable philosophy. And probably they were looking for some predecessors for them. I'm a materialist, so there has to be some materialist in the past also. And some idealists came later and they removed these materialists. So then they probably started identifying Bauddha Parampara as a materialist philosophy. But imposition of this matter idea distinction on Bauddha thought, how misplaced it is, comes out very clearly when a scholar, whichever scholar, sits down and studies the Bauddha texts and Bauddha Parampara or Bauddha practices, sitting at the feet of the Bauddha gurus. From inside, if you try to understand the tradition from inside, you will begin to realize that this matter idea kind of categorization and distinction itself is highly uh, unsuitable for imposition on those texts and ideas. what is so repelling when you do such an imposition is that Marxism, as a materialist philosophy, considers worldly pursuit of worldly acquisitions as justifiable. Not only justifiable, it looks at that as a fundamental nature of human being. And for class war to emerge, contentment in those who are poor is counter-revolutionary, according to Marxism. Only when the poor class have-nots develop a lack of contentment and develop an aspiration for wealth, they develop a jealousy for the rich class. And that class jealousy only can lead to class war. And only such a class war can lead to a revolution where the rich is toppled from power and a proletariat dictatorship is established. Now look at Buddhism. In Bauddha Parampara, Asteya, Aparigraha, all these are fundamental notions. And these notions, which are there in Buddhism as key concepts, which go against the fundamentals of Marxism, are completely ignored by the contemporary Marxist scholars of Buddhism. And they project Buddhism as something of their kind. All over the world today, Buddhist texts are the most rigorously studied texts. There are Western Buddhist scholars. Western scholars of Buddhism are more in number than Western scholars of any other aspect of Indian culture. And all of them identify Buddhism with its asceticism. But Indian Marxist scholars of colonial times were not emphasizing the ascetic aspect of Buddhism. They were probably only looking at the rebellion side of Buddhism. They thought that Buddhism was rebelling against some existing tradition. That was Brahmanical tradition. Brahmanical tradition is the dominant tradition. So, because Buddhist tradition is rebelling against them, the commonness between their own Marxist path and Buddhism for them is that rebelling aspect. Looking at that rebelling aspect as the commonness, they slipped into understanding Buddhism as their own type, materialist kind of philosophy. Contrastingly, interestingly, Western Buddhist scholars identified Buddhism with its meditation, inward practices, asceticism, and then they came up with another interesting proposition that as per their understanding of early Vedic culture, early Vedic philosophy, there is no such aspect like asceticism in the Vedic culture. So, asceticism, as per the contemporary Western Buddhist scholars, is not Vaidika in its beginnings. They came up with proposals like the ashrama, which is named as Sannyasa Ashrama, itself is a newcomer into Vaidika Parampara. Chaturvidha Purusharthas and Chaturvidha Ashramas itself is a later development. It is all an evolution from later times. And there is a great role of influence of Buddhism in the development of these new ashramas like Sannyasa Ashrama on the Vaidika Parampara is their model of understanding the past. In that model of understanding the past, they include geographical, historical views about the origins of early Vedic texts and early Vedic literature. As per that model, the early Vedic literature where the sannyasa ascetic thinking does not exist is on the western side of Indic subcontinent, and because Buddha origins geographically are seen on the eastern side, scholars like Johannes Bronkhorst came up with a very clear black and white compartmentalized demarcation of geography. Eastern side as Magadha side, the other side as the Vaidika side, the western part of Indic subcontinent as the western, the Vaidika side. And they started proposing the word used by Johannes Bronkhorst as the title of his book is Greater Magadha as a thesis. It is his thesis, Greater Magadha thesis. And he proposes that very clearly there is a demarcation. On the Vaidika side, no asceticism, no inward practices, no yoga, nothing. On the eastern side, there is no pacificity, only pacificity, only inward practices, only meditation, only yoga. And these two sides, they interacted with each other. And then the influence of ascetic side started developing on Vaidika side. So for this thesis to hold, they need the dating of the Vaidika texts. For them, the key is the dating of Upanishadic texts, because Vedanta as a darshana, which is an inward practice oriented darshana, asceticism oriented darshana, it starts with Upanishads as per the insiders. Actually, Upanishads and Vedanta are taken as synonymous. Vedanta is the word for Upanishads, name for Upanishads. So, for them, the most convenient dating strategy, chronological strategy, is to say that Upanishads are all post-Buddhist. It is here that the whole debate lies. There are scholars on the Western side itself, among Western Indologists itself, who date Upanishads as not all. Upanishads are so big in number, and the composition of Upanishads extended in history much later also. In very recent times also, Upanishads like Allopanishad were composed. Allah is obviously a post-Mughal word. So if somebody is composing Allopanishad, obviously it is a post-Mughal composition. So there are, if we find the name Upanishad in the name of a text, we cannot take them as all the early Upanishads. But among the early Upanishads, and actually, during the British times, among Indological scholars of India also, inside Indian universities also, or Indian scholars also, they started using a word called principal Upanishads and main Upanishads or principal Upanishads or Dashopanishad, 10 Upanishads and all that. And among these principal Upanishads, main Upanishads, which Upanishads are pre-Buddhist, which Upanishads are post-Buddhist, is the whole point of debate among contemporary studies. So if all the principal Upanishads are post-Buddhist, only then you can agree with the proposal that ascetic thinking, inward practices oriented thinking is all an influence from Bauddha Parampara. And there are Western scholars who take that position, that all Upanishads, even the principal Upanishads, are all post-Buddhist. And Upanishadic thought itself is an influence of Buddhism. What Buddhism, which Buddhist text is pre-Upanishadic? In fact, there is no such text. Interestingly, textual material that you see today from the Buddhist side, if you look at principal key debates towards the Vaidika side, take for example, Anatmavada. Obviously, Anatta presupposes Atman. And Atman already existed by the time Anatta was being discussed in the Buddhist text. And most of the Buddhist texts that you see presuppose certain Vaidika ideas. Mostly they are Vedantic ideas, mostly they are Upanishadic ideas only. So, if you have to go with a model of a pre-Upanishadic Buddhist text, you have to believe in legends, you have to believe in certain beliefs of early Buddhist, original Buddhas, original students, and their texts and all that, and then talk about that influence on Upanishadic texts. At least inside the Upanishadic texts, there is no very clear expression of their responding to any thought like Bauddha thought. There are debates, very clear debates inside the Upanishadic texts, but those debates do not reflect a Purva Paksha of a Bauddha person and a Khandana being done from the Vedantic side. The Purva Paksha is also from the Vaidika side only. The Vaidika Rishi or Rishika raises a question and a Vaidika response is given. There is no Vaidika Bauddha Purva Paksha being mentioned inside the Upanishadic text and a Vaidika response included inside the Upanishadic text. So you have to only conjecture. You have to only create a hypothesis that the author of the Upanishad is hiding the borrowing from the Buddha side. He actually has an influence, but he is not saying that. He has a very bad habit of hiding that influence from the other side and all that. But that is obviously ridiculous. So these models by Johannes Bronkhorst and others have not uh, been received well by all. There are many followers of Greater Magadha thesis, but Richard Gombrich, his book is How Buddhism Began, the conditioned genesis of the early teachings. It does not accept this model of Johannes Bronkhorst. It looks at influence of Vaidika ideas on Buddhism and in the early stage, and later a mutual influence from Bauddha Parampara to Vaidika and back and forth. Alexander Wine's book, The Origin of Buddhist Meditation, also takes a similar position. It talks influence of Buddha ideas of meditation and so on the Buddhist meditation. And regarding lack of inward practice ideas or meditation, yoga on the Vaidika side in the Veda mantras, we see scholars like Finian M.M. Gerety. His book is on Om meditation practice. Between sound and silence in early yoga, meditation on Om at death is his work. In that, he talks of a Om meditation practice already being mentioned in the Veda mantras. Actually, he has got another dissertation. Finian M. Gerety has got another dissertation where he traces the origin of Om in some Samavedic practices. And there are other scholars also who talk of, say, for example, Cally Charles Smith. He talks about Adhyajna towards a performance grammar of the Vedas. And in that, he shows that these ideas like Adhyajna existed already. And all such scholars, they don't agree with Johannes Bronkhorst's Greater Magadha thesis. So this impression that all the Western, so I have been making this distinction, I want to repeat it. Western Buddhism is different from Western Buddhist Indologists. Indologists focusing on Buddhism having origin in Western countries, they are Western Indologists, we can call Western Indologists focusing on Buddhism. They need not be Buddhists. A Western Indologist focusing on Buddhism may claim that he has no religion at all. He doesn't subscribe to any religion at all. So a Western Buddhist is a person, he may not be an academician at all. He's only a practitioner of, he's a Westerner and a practitioner of Buddhism. Then he's a Western Buddhist. Among the Western scholars focusing on Buddhism and the interface between Vaidika and Buddha practices, there is at least a small number of scholars who have not gone to that extent of saying that the East is this, West is this, and there is a contrast, and there was no asceticism or inward practice at all on the Vaidika side and all that. They agreed with the interaction between the two traditions and borrowing from Vaidika into Buddhist tradition. And this interaction continued in India. There are lots of studies about the Bauddha Vaidika interface being very friendly with each other. I am also on the moderating side and on the controlling side. My colleague Nitin is waiting to stop me. But I do not want to stop without mentioning that the Shatavahana period inscriptions, the, the same inscription mentions the family members of the same family, one being a practitioner of Buddhism, Buddha Bhagavan, and the other member being Shatavajapeya Yajna performer. And in the Nagarjuna Konda area, where the uh, founding Acharya, Nagarjuna Acharya, lived, the archaeologists, when they relocated the Vijayapuri capital's structures, what we see today is that a Buddhist monastery and the Ranganatha temple exist sharing a wall in the same structure. And that reality exists even today. All the serious traditional Buddhists have a very great respect for Vaidika thought parampara. There is a friendly interaction between Vaidika and Bauddha paramparas. So, if there is a debate, if there is a Vada, that Vada is limited only to the Vada side, and that does not have any cultural or social influences as it is being attempted to be projected by shenanigan academic scholars of Vaidika and Buddhist studies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nagaraj, for a very comprehensive introduction, an overview of the contemporary studies, and for providing very interesting historical tidbits. And most importantly, I think the takeaway is what you made, the remarks you made at the end, that the very Vada, the debate and the dialogue has to be understood in a proper context. There is one is the shared history at the cultural level, where there was lot of cooperation, lot of intermingling, and lot of um, coexistence. But at the same time, at the philosophical level, there were very severe debates, severe critiques. So, a, a Vada, a severe critique, a philosophical critique of a position, never translated into a persecution. So, this is a very salient feature of Indian civilization itself. So, thank you for providing this a foundational, laying the foundation for how we should look at the discussion in today's symposium